Today on Psycast, we're going to talk about something quietly painful, why we never finish what we start. Let me ask you something. How many things in your life are unfinished? Half-written stories, paused projects, unread books, unopened courses, broken routines, drifting dreams. We all carry these little ghosts, things we once felt passionate about, but slowly abandoned. And every time we look at them, we feel a small sting of shame. We tell ourselves stories like, I'm lazy, I have no discipline, I'll never change. And yet, something deep inside us knows that can't be the full truth, because the desire was real, the energy was there. So, what happened? This is one of those quiet battles we don't talk much about. It's not dramatic, but it drains us. It's not dangerous, but it eats away at our sense of identity. There's a particular pain in starting things with hope, only to leave them behind, again and again. We stop trusting ourselves. We doubt our capacity. We start to shrink our dreams so they don't hurt so much when they collapse. And eventually, we stop beginning things at all. But here's the thing. It's not laziness. That's just the label we slap on a much more complex experience. If you've ever felt this way, I want you to know. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're weak. There are reasons we abandon what we start, and those reasons are not always about effort. Sometimes they're about fear. Sometimes about perfectionism. And sometimes they're rooted in a deep misunderstanding of what motivation even is. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher known for his brutally honest view of life, once said something that hits right at the core of this. He wrote, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." Let that sink in. You can choose your actions, but you don't always choose your desires. In other words, you don't control what pulls your attention or how long that pull lasts. That doesn't make you lazy. It makes you human. Think about how many times you've started something with fire in your chest. For a week or two, it feels like magic. You're focused, energized, clear, and then suddenly it fades. You hit a wall, the momentum dies, and you're left wondering where it all went. This is the part we often blame on ourselves. But what if this drop in energy isn't a personal failure, but a part of the natural cycle of effort? Schopenhauer believed that our inner world is full of blind impulses, that we're often moved not by logic, but by something deeper, more instinctual, something he called will. It's not a rational, organized force. It's chaotic, unpredictable. And if we misunderstand it, we suffer. Because we expect ourselves to act like machines, consistent, linear, efficient. But we're not machines. We're human organisms, moved by moods, fears, unconscious stories, and invisible weights. No wonder we get stuck. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone starts learning a new language. For the first few days, it's exciting. They picture traveling, connecting with new cultures, maybe even feeling a new version of themselves. But soon, the grammar becomes tedious. Progress slows. The dream feels far away. And now, they're not just tired. They're disappointed in themselves. They start saying things like, I always do this. I never follow through. And the shame becomes heavier than the task itself. So they stop, not because they're lazy, but because they've absorbed a deeper belief that things should come easily if they're meant for you. That discipline should feel natural. That effort means something is wrong. These myths destroy us, because in real life, progress is messy. And sometimes, what kills our drive isn't a lack of passion. It's the unbearable pressure to always feel passionate. What no one tells us is that most of the things worth doing will, at some point, stop feeling good. The emotional high that comes with beginning is rarely sustainable. That spark, it's not meant to last. It's meant to start. After that, something else has to take over. And that something is usually quiet, unglamorous, and deeply misunderstood. Commitment. But commitment is hard to hold on to in a culture obsessed with instant results. We've been trained to expect transformation without friction. We want visible progress, fast feedback, constant motivation. And when reality offers us boredom, plateaus, and invisible growth, we panic. We think we're failing, but we're not. We're just encountering the truth that most of life happens in the in-between, in the gray zones, in the unremarkable hours no one claps for. I think one of the hardest things to accept is this. Beginnings are emotional, but finishing is existential. Starting something is about excitement, but finishing, staying with something long enough to see it through, that's about identity. It forces us to confront who we are without the thrill of novelty. It asks us to show up when no one is watching. And that's terrifying. Because what if we give our best and it's still not enough? What if we finish and the result doesn't match the dream? This is where Schopenhauer's thought cuts deeper. He believed that human suffering often comes from chasing illusions, especially the illusion of lasting satisfaction. For him, the human will is a restless force, always reaching, never content. We want things not because they will fulfill us, but because we are wired to want. And once we get what we want, we quickly move on to the next desire. So in a way, he was warning us, be careful with your expectations. Be gentle with your hope. Because most of our suffering comes not from what happens, but from what we expected it to be. And when it comes to unfinished projects, those expectations often work against us. We imagine a version of ourselves that's always focused, always inspired, always productive. And when we can't live up to that image, we collapse. We give up, not because we don't care, but because caring feels too heavy when it's tied to perfection. Let me give you another scene. Imagine someone starting to write a book. In the beginning, they're moved by a vision. The idea feels important, maybe even urgent. But as they begin writing, doubt creeps in. Their sentences sound awkward. Their voice doesn't match what they imagined. The gap between their idea and their execution becomes unbearable. And so, they pause. Tell themselves they'll come back to it when they're more prepared, more inspired. But months pass. The spark is gone. And in its place, there's only silence. They think they've failed. But what really happened is simpler. They were never taught how to carry something through the valley of self-doubt. We all have that valley. Every meaningful process has a point where the dream fades and the work begins, where the results aren't visible, where your own mind turns against you. And this is the part most people don't talk about, because it's not pretty, but it's real. And it's where everything meaningful is either lost or found. I once heard someone say that most people don't fear failure. They fear being seen failing. That stayed with me. Because when I think about all the things we leave unfinished, I wonder how many of them we abandoned, not because they lost meaning, but because we couldn't bear to be mediocre at them. We couldn't stand the gap between who we wanted to be and who we actually were in the process of becoming. This is where perfectionism quietly ruins us, not by making us want everything to be perfect, but by making us believe that anything less than perfect isn't worth doing. That unless it's exceptional, it's shameful. And that belief doesn't just paralyze our action, it poisons our identity. Because now, every step we take feels like a risk to our worth. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And I think this is why so many people never finish what they start. Because to finish something is to expose yourself, to bring something into the world and say, "This is mine." And in doing that, you also say, "Judge me." You make yourself visible, vulnerable, real, and that's terrifying. So we stay in the safety of the unfinished. We linger in the space of potential, because potential is pure, untouched. It can't be criticized. It holds promise, and promise feels safer than proof. But here's the cost: a life full of almosts, a heart full of maybes, and the quiet regret of never knowing who we could have been if we had stayed. This fear of exposure, of being seen, is one of the most human things about us. We want to matter. We want to be good. But we also want to be safe. And these two desires often pull in opposite directions. Schopenhauer believed that the will, our inner drive, doesn't care about peace. It only wants. It pushes. It reaches. And in this restless reaching, we suffer. Because the more we desire, the more we fear loss. The more we create, the more we fear judgment. But maybe there's another way to see it. Maybe we're not supposed to escape that fear, but move with it. Maybe finishing things isn't about confidence, it's about courage. The courage to be imperfect, the courage to look foolish, the courage to do something badly before we can ever do it well. Let me give you one more image. Imagine a child learning to draw. They don't hesitate. They don't wait for perfect conditions or question their talent. They just pick up the crayon and begin. And what they make might be messy, but it's alive. It's real. It exists. That's the part we forget as adults. We trade aliveness for approval. And in doing so, we lose the freedom to finish things imperfectly. I'm not saying the fear will go away. It probably won't. But maybe we can make space for it. Maybe we can say, yes, I'm afraid. And still, I'll try. That small act, to keep going even when the voice of doubt is loud, is an act of rebellion. A quiet, steady resistance against the part of us that wants to stay hidden forever. There's something else no one really talks about, and it's this. Finishing things often feels like grief, because when you complete something, you're letting go of the dream it could have been, of the identity you held while working on it, of the future you imagined around it. There's a quiet mourning in every ending, even the good ones, even the ones we longed for. That's why we sometimes avoid finishing, not just because of fear or laziness or doubt, but because we don't want the story to end. We don't want to face the stillness that comes after. While something is in progress, it keeps us company. It gives us a reason, a direction, an excuse. Once it's done, we have to meet ourselves without the project. And that can be unnerving, because maybe the thing we're really avoiding isn't the work. It's the emptiness that waits on the other side. Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." It's the feeling that arises when we realize just how many paths are open and how none of them guarantee safety. To finish something is to close one of those paths, to commit to a version of the future, and there's always some anxiety in that, because now it's real. Now it can disappoint. Now we can be wrong. So we linger. We stretch the process. We revise endlessly. We tell ourselves we're not ready yet. But more often than not, that's not true. What we're not ready for is the vulnerability of being seen, the confrontation with our own limitations, the strange silence that arrives once the noise of building stops. And yet, we have to cross that threshold, not because the result matters so much, but because we matter, because our voice, our effort, our creation, unfinished, keeps us fragmented, and something in us longs for wholeness. Let me tell you something I've come to believe. The point of finishing isn't perfection. It's closure. It's allowing something to be enough. It's saying, this is what I could do with what I had in the time I had. It's choosing completion over control. And that choice is not just productive. It's deeply human. It's what allows us to move forward, to grow, to begin again without dragging the weight of everything left undone. When we don't finish things, we carry them. They don't disappear. They live in the background, quietly asking for our attention. And the longer they stay open, the heavier they become. Not because of the thing itself, but because of what it represents. Another version of us we never became. And here's the truth. Not everything needs to be finished. But the things that matter to us, they deserve to be honored. And sometimes, the most healing thing we can do is simply to say, I'm going to bring this to its end. Not because it's perfect, not because I feel ready, but because I deserve to experience the peace of completion. That peace, it's not loud. It doesn't come with applause, but it clears space in the soul. And in that space, something else can begin. Something real, not rushed. Something born not out of pressure, but out of presence. So maybe the question isn't, why don't I finish anything? Maybe the real question is, what am I afraid will happen if I do? Because beneath the half-built bridges of our lives, there are often stories we've never questioned. Stories about worth, visibility, enoughness. Stories that tell us who we're allowed to be. And finishing something, truly staying with it until the end, often requires rewriting those stories in silence, alone, without anyone to affirm us along the way. And that's where many of us falter. Not because we lack the energy or the time, or the tools, but because we've never been taught to stay, to sit with the discomfort of doubt without escaping, to choose stillness over stimulation, to keep going when the praise fades and the work is just work. We crave the beginning because it gives us a reason to believe. But what we really need is to learn how to believe without a reason. James Clear, who writes beautifully about habits and change, says something powerful. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And I think that applies here too. It's not about how inspired you feel or how deeply you care. It's about how gently, how steadily, how consistently you return to the thing you said mattered. Even on the boring days, even on the lost days, even when no one claps. And that return isn't just an action, it's a healing. It's how we prove to ourselves that we're not just dreamers, but builders, that we can trust ourselves again. Because every time you show up, even imperfectly, you repair something inside of you. Something that once learned to expect disappointment. Something that stopped believing you'd stay. So if you've left things unfinished, welcome. You're not alone, and you're not broken. But maybe you're ready now. Ready not to be perfect, but to be present. Ready to walk through the fear, not around it. Ready to hold something fragile until it becomes something whole. And if you're looking for a place to begin again, start here. Pick one thing, just one. Not the biggest, not the most impressive, the one that's been quietly calling to you. The one that still matters, even in its silence. And give it a chance to be finished. Let it have an ending so that you can have a beginning. Because finishing isn't a test of your worth. It's a gift you give to yourself. It's saying, I stayed. It's the quiet victory of knowing that even when it got hard or dull or scary, you didn't walk away this time. And maybe that's all healing really is. Staying with yourself long enough to become whole again. So if you're still holding guilt for all the things you left behind, let me say this. Maybe those unfinished pieces weren't failures. Maybe they were rehearsals. Maybe they were part of your becoming. And maybe now you're ready to stop rehearsing. We are not here to perform perfection. We are here to engage with the rawness of being alive, to try, to fall short, to try again, to leave behind the myth that we need to be extraordinary in order to be enough. Because sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to finish something quietly, without applause, without certainty, just a quiet closing of the loop for your own peace. There is dignity in completion, not because the world sees it, but because you do, because you were there, because you stayed. And one day, when you look back, it won't be the masterpieces you remember most. It will be the moments when you showed up in spite of the doubt and chose to stay with something long enough to witness it become real. That's where the healing lives. Not in the finish line, but in the staying. This was today's reflection on the Psycast. Until next time, be gentle with your process. And remember, your pace is not your failure, it's your rhythm. Trust it.